I've spoken a lot about what is about to come, but I was just thinking the other day that I need to speak about preparation. Okay, first of all, you need to be prepared in terms of if it's possible, going to higher grounds, if it's possible, um, being in okay being in surroundings that are more protective from natural elements that are expected to increase in the near future. Also, what I think is very important is prepping in terms of preparation in terms of your sustenance. Now, I think that some people may be able to have provisions, especially people who live in lands that are in such elevations that are not so inundated when these natural events occur. So people may be able to still farm. So for those who will be in safe places, you should prepare by becoming self-sufficient. Now, the greatest problem that we have as a generation is the city life. There are a lot of people who are dependent on the supply chain continuing to work. They are dependent on vegetables continuing to flow in from hundreds of kilometers from their home. They are dependent on electricity, on motor transport, which are the things that actually preparation is breaking free of these things or finding alternatives. So basically, start considering alternatives to electricity, alternatives to motorized machinery. That means motor vehicles. It means machinery and manufacturing. It means computers. The computers will fall more in the bracket of technology. So start finding alternatives to technology. If there's information that you would rather have in solid form, keep it in solid form. If printed or basically solid, out of machinery, if it's very important. For those of us, and I'm one of them, who live in towns and are dependent on supplies, start prepping by collecting, increasing the storing of non-perishable goods. Now, there's something that I must say should be learned from my attempt at doing this. First, I started with grains, which would make a lot of sense if the grains were prepared today in the same way that our great grandparents prepared them. Our great grandparents stored grains for very long periods of time, and this is because they had very specific methods of drying that completely ridded the plants or the grains of moisture. Now that is lost. So most of the produce that is in our stores has a lot of moisture, and the packaging also matters. So if it's grain, and I would assume that if a different form of packaging, like if it was sealed with vacuum or tinned, I would assume that it would last longer. I'm talking about uncooked grain. But if it's stored in paper, it's highly likely, and if you buy it in a store out there, it's highly likely that the moisture content was not completely drawn out of it. So the best that you could do with such kind of produce is you can't really store it beyond 3 months, and this is something that I've tried, especially legumes. Same for most of other grains. Rice has a longer shelf life, probably because it's usually smaller and harder, less penetrable by weevils. But I've still seen rice getting penetrated or getting chewed up by weevils or some kind of a pest. I don't think it's a weevil, but I've seen rice, but at least they have a longer shelf life. Now, this leaves us with a few choices, and one of them I would recommend dried vegetables. If you're in an area where dried vegetables can be found, there are vegetables that have been powdered. For example, powdered spices or powdered. Okay, I've seen dried vegetables, like dried traditional vegetables. If you can find them, well and good, store them. Tinned vegetables. Tinned cooked foods like beans, tuna, because if you find yourself in a position where you need to survive for extended periods of time, you need a balanced diet. You still need a balanced diet. If you find yourself in a position where sudden extreme deluge from water has swept away all kinds of crops throughout the country, there's going to be a shortage and you need something to fall back on. There may be places where some crops will grow, but demand and supply, they won't reach everywhere. Now, the good thing is that in that kind of a situation of where the water that's a threat is fresh water, you can do with the water. You can always purify the water, so you could keep within your household bleach or purifying tablets. And be careful with the bleach. Some water is just good enough. Sometimes the dust is not as threatening as it's taken to be. I've drank a lot of brown water and I'm okay, but I wouldn't speak for everybody. So there's water, though I would assume that water that has swept through cities will come with a lot of pollution. So do keep an extra bottle of bleach, chlorine to be specific, or water purifying tablets or water purifying whatever it is that you use. Then another thing that lasts a bit longer, milk powder. And these days in the market you'll find a lot of kinds of milk powder. There's coconut milk powder, there's the normal dairy milk powder. So you can keep it in hand. I've seen that there's a manufacturer of very huge bars. Anything that is in powder form basically, and that is food, is your friend. So powdered spices, powdered milk that is properly sealed, because some of them are usually sealed in tins, that is properly sealed to increase their shelf life. It's usually said that tinned goods normally can last even longer than the indicated expiry date. It's because of the process of packaging. The process is makes it basically impenetrable and makes it very hard for some organisms to grow inside it. So I remember in my case, there's a time I started buying, and you can do this gradually as we draw near to the extreme seasons. Start slowly. You don't have to go with your giant trolley and fill it with everything. Just start slowly. Every time you go to a supermarket, buy an extra 2 of this and an extra 2 of long-lasting foods. And storage is also important. Store in a dry, cool place. Don't store it on the floor, because the floor sometimes can be sweaty. It can lead to corrosiveness of the corrosion of metals, especially. And also grains can take water from the ground. So if you're storing grain, put a raised wooden bed beneath it to avoid that absorption of the moisture from the ground. Okay. There are things like spaghetti that last very long. There are things like tomato sauce. I would recommend storing tomato sauce as opposed to tomato paste. Remember, you're storing things that you're not sure that you'll be able to cook when you're in between a rock and a hard place. So unless you know how to make fire from scratch, and I'm not sure how that, unless you know how to make fires from scratch like a Maasai warrior, try and store foods that won't need fire. Make those your first priority. And also, there are a lot of foods that can last long. I said previously, spaghetti, they can last for more than a year shelf life. There's of course sugar, jams, all kinds of jams, so long as they're sealed. The key is sealing. So yeah, there's also, if you live in Africa, there's all kinds of dried fish, though even dried meat you can find in Africa. So handle with caution if you know how to handle them, because I understand they are very sensitive, and some of them you need to be skilled in the preservation, and they can be sensitive on the stomach also. So I will basically advise storage of foods that can last longer than, that can last around 2 years if you reduce your portion in a hard time. Of course, when there's a serious calamity, you may want to reduce your portion. You can't just pile up your plates and you don't know if you'll be able to find food tomorrow. I think it's a bit careless. So what I believe is that if it's a deluge, we may find food in the water in terms of living creatures that come in the water, but not many people know how to fish. So if you can't fish, arrange for yourself to have your own supplies. Then there are also fruits that can actually last forever. There are fruits that don't go bad. There are produces that don't go bad. One of them is honey. Honey doesn't even need sealing to be preserved. Just put it in a bottle, so long as it's closed. It doesn't even need to be closed, but to keep off the ants and to keep off the funny insects and larvae from being, I doubt that even larvae can be hatched in it, but to keep off pests away from it, just put them in a container. If you can collect honey, that's awesome. Honey, dates, those can last a very long time, although they're sugar based, so you may not be able to eat so many at once, but those are survival, just for the sake of survival bits, so to say. Crackers, if you keep them away from moisture, they can take you a very long while. And a lot of snacks. Now, I don't think that snacks are really worth. I don't think snacks are really worth storing for prepping, because most of them are very low on the level of satisfaction. But in case of emergency, if you have crackers, they will save a life. If you can keep chocolate, cocoa, keep cocoa, and if you can keep healthy, we've got a lot of healthy things that may be culture specific. maybe powdered things or even unpowdered. There are people who powder tomatoes. And for tomatoes, like I said, rather than for me, I'd prefer prepping with tomato sauce as opposed to tomato paste, because tomato paste has to be cooked. Well, tomato sauce is comes ready to eat and is preserved, especially if it's preserved with things like vinegar. I usually look at my preservative to keep it as minimal and as harmless as possible. So prepare specifically for water. There are people who will need to prepare also for earthquakes, extreme earthquakes that will change the courses of rivers, that will change our geographical plane completely. So prepare for that kind of eventuality, so that at least we can have, if God wants to save us, at least some of us will be saved. I wouldn't like to come out of it on the other side and you find that entire races have been wiped out, or an entire continent has been wiped out. It will be really sad. I'd like some of us to survive. So failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Remember that. There's a reason that why we get warnings beforehand. Remember Noah. Noah was given measurements to build a ship. He did build that ship, and if you read some of the ancient texts, I was reading the Colburn the other day, and it's referring to other people from the palace. Because remember, for you to undertake that kind of a mission, you had, or the leadership of the day had to really be involved, so that they could understand what was happening in terms of what are you doing on my land. So basically, take your warnings and prepare. The future has already been written.